Story 1. A Scream in the Woods. This happened quite a bit of time ago, but I could still remember it as if it happened last week. I'll never forget those screams that I had heard. Those are forever embedded in my memory banks. This was back in 1986, July. I was camping in western Idaho. I can't remember the mountain area that I was around, but I was solo camping and had just gotten up in the early morning hours, was getting ready to make my coffee. I was just getting my fire going when off in the distance, I heard the most horrendous scream that I had ever heard. Don't be fooled. This was no mountain lion scream. I've heard plenty of those, and this sounded nothing like that. In fact, out of all the animals I have ever heard make noise in the wild, this sounded nothing like either of them. This was something else entirely. It sounded like a mix of a huge man with giant lungs and a very angry gorilla. That's the best way I can put it together in words. It was unlike anything I've ever heard in my life, and it scared me. The sheer power and force behind it was something to be reckoned with. Due to the distortion and reverberation of sound throughout the valley, you can't really tell how close or how far sound is. At least where I was. These powerful screams, or roars, in their entirety, lasted roughly 15 to 20 seconds, with a very short tail end. I'm not joking you. They lasted an incredibly long amount of time, which astonished me as much as it made me fearful. The one roar, the singular scream, was followed up with loud wood knocking, maybe not even a few moments later, and that were random patterns in groups of 3. Either something was trying to communicate to me, or something was trying to communicate to another one of it. I don't fancy Bigfoot stories, but this one always takes me back to the possibility that there might be something more than I bargained for deep in the woods. Story 2. Waiting for the Opportunity. Back when I was a child, probably around 7 or 8 years of age, there was a very small creek that I used to love playing at with my brothers and sisters. Well, one day, I distinctly remember playing down by this same creek on a hot summer day, and after my brothers and sisters both left me by myself, for what reasons I can't remember, probably to go grab lunch or a snack, I was left to throw and skip rocks all by myself. I wasn't scared or lonely. I loved being at the creek, whether being by myself or by the company of my family. It was always so peaceful and beautiful. But that day, I remember gaining a whole new perspective of that little creek and feeling something my 7-year-old self had never felt before. A terrible fear from deep within your body. Not just a feeling of fear, but a feeling where your entire body is consumed by one horrible emotion. I noticed, even at that young age of 7 or 8, the feeling of being watched or observed by something. When I looked up, I didn't see anything. I can remember I was probably ankle deep in the creek. I think either looking for rocks, maybe crawdads, maybe fish, when I ignored the feeling. At that young age, I don't think I quite understood gut instinct and what it meant to feel being watched or being followed, or that you're potentially in danger. I was so young and naive, probably for the better, but, as feelings do, it persisted and lasted, and only grew and grew in strength. When finally, I remember, I was looking all around me, wondering why I was feeling like somebody was watching me, when out of the corner of my eye, off on a small hill, not too far away, was a face staring me, high from the trees. It kind of resembled that of a deer, but I could see the outline of a skull and antlers. I can definitely remember seeing empty eye sockets, as if it was a skull, hence why I described it as that. The body was all black, and I remember seeing large claws holding onto the branches of the tree that this thing was in front of, or behind, since it was surrounded by them, and appeared to be holding onto both in front and back to be able to see me. The scenery might be kind of hard to explain, so excuse me tripping over my words, but I'm trying to recall this and type it up at the same time. I don't think I was exactly terrified. I think at 7 years old, I was curious and wondering what I was looking at. I didn't realize in this state of mind and age, this was some sort of demonic-looking creature, because as an adult, I could tell you now, if I were to paint this creature, that's exactly what it would resemble. But 7-year-old me had never seen such a thing. I never watched scary movies. I never saw any sort of terrible drawings or any depictions of monsters. That realm of reality was never a part of my childhood. Probably for the better. At least until this very day. I remember standing there, I should say, studying it thoroughly, as it studying me. That's when it began to move closer, as if it got the green light to move in for the kill. I saw more and more of its features. It was stocky, covered in very black fur. It was jet black, blacker than midnight, and it had very long arms. The forearms, I remember, were incredibly long. The hands were incredibly slender, and each finger was like a long claw. I'll never forget, it had one large opposable thumb with a long 8-inch or so claw, and it had 3 fingers, also extremely long, oversized, and mainly just a long claw on it. It had small legs, also covered in this black fur, jet black, like the rest of its body. I didn't see a tail, and I didn't really see any feet, but its shoulders were the most bulky, like it was lifting weights, and all the weight and bulk were in its width and shoulders, and its head was this weird-looking deer-like skull with large deformed antlers. I don't remember seeing any eyes, just empty eye sockets that stared back at me, lifelessly. But yet, this skull was clearly attached to a living thing, an animal. I have never seen an animal in my life that has the head of a corpse or a skull. I didn't quite understand it, but what I did understand is as it approached me more comfortably and faster, I began to really understand that this meant me nothing but harm, and only harm, and that I should run if I value my safety, comfort, and life. The closer it got, and the more I saw of it, it scared 7-year-old me pretty bad. And when it got close enough, that was more than enough for me, and I took off running, fleeing up the small hill, back up to where my other brothers and sisters were playing. I didn't dare tell my mom and dad. They would have blew me off. But I did to my other brothers and sisters, don't go and play down by the creek anymore. Of course, being a child, I was met with laughter, joking, and mockery. They ended up going back down there and playing that same day, but never saw anything. I too eventually went back down there with my brothers and sisters. Again, never saw that thing again. Now, as an adult, I look back at the situation and review it with a much more intelligent consciousness. I almost wonder if that thing had been waiting, just the same way lions do when they go after a pack of gazelle. They wait to weed out the weakest and slowest one, single them out so the prey is easier to capture. And I wonder if that's the exact same mentality this thing had. Assuming, with having just a skull for a head, it had those thoughts. But it had the thoughts enough to watch me, to come closer to me, to try and grab me, from what I can remember. Clearly, this was some sort of unknown predatory thing. And if I would have stayed there, it for sure would have grabbed me and took me to God only knows where. That was also, that I can remember, the only time I was ever really down by the creek by myself for that long, with having nobody else around. Sure, I had been down there by myself before, but never longer than a few moments, as a brother or sister was always close by, and somebody either had to make a snack run or a bathroom run. But this was the only time I was actually abandoned for more than 10, 20, 30 minutes. Maybe that's why this thing decided to move in. Who knows how long it had been watching us play, for maybe not just that day, but for days, seasons, possibly years. All I know is, I still see this thing in my nightmares sometimes, and it still scares me just as bad as the day that it tried to come grab me. If you or somebody you know has an encounter they would like me to read on this channel, please submit it to stories@whatlurksbeneath.com. The email can be found in the description below.